Here's a streamlined, fresh retelling that keeps the heart of the story while making the pacing tighter and the scenes more cinematic. They arrived with victory grins and no invitation. My ex's parents shouldered past me like the lease had their names on it. His father took a long, satisfied look at my secondhand couch. His mother plucked a law text off the coffee table, grimaced, and let it thud back down. Great news, his father announced. The judge finally caught on to your act. I knew, with a clarity that felt like cold air in my lungs, that their son had lied. Again. That same morning, he'd been sentenced. 8 years for sexually assaulting me at gunpoint, and a $2.3 million judgment. But they were here to celebrate a victory that didn't exist. His mother opened my fridge without asking, performed a gasp at the sparse shelves, and when I moved to close it, she blocked me with her hip. His father sat, pulled out a checkbook, like he was about to sponsor a charity, and scratched out $10. 10. He set it on the table with a flourish. You'll need this, he said, since the lawyers dropped you. She wandered to the mantel, turned my son's photo toward the wall, and smoothed a crumpled Mother's Day card with the kind of care you give something you plan to ruin. Courts aren't stupid, she said. They saw through you. She added a line about taking me to court for custody, false accusations, alienation, unfit, like she'd learned the buzzwords from a podcast. Then came the spit, a wet mark darkening my carpet, a power move as old as playground cruelty. I couldn't move. His father rose to his full height to block out my view of the door, and just when I felt smaller than my own shoes, she scooped up the check, tore it into confetti, and tossed it in my face. Her phone rang. She answered on speaker, because why not put my living room on blast? A recorded voice broke in. This is a call from a correctional facility. Then his voice cracked, wrecked. Mom, Dad, I'm in. I'm sorry. I couldn't tell you. He said guilty. He said 8 years. He said he lied. The lie room changed sizes. His father slid down the doorframe like someone had pulled the bones out of him. His mother reached for me, fingers shaking. We believed him, she whispered. I didn't move. They left without another word. The silence after the slam echoing through my chest. I cleaned. I documented. I steadied myself against the counter and wrote everything down. Time, date, what they touched, what they said, the spit, the $10, snowstorm. My lawyer picked up on the second ring. We talked collections, payment plans, practicalities. My hands stopped shaking when the conversation became a to-do list. Then the siege began. Late night knocks. Whispered apologies into my camera. Handwritten notes. This isn't over. We're family. Spoofed calls from my mother's number. You can't keep him from us, his father breathed, then hung up. A photo of my son at recess slipped into my mailbox. We just want to talk. Tires slashed. Car keyed. Mailbox glued shut. A fake eviction notice taped to my door. A flower delivery I never asked for. A mediation letter demanding grandparent visitation. A defamation lawsuit that read like bad fan fiction and aimed for my bank account. A fake profile in my name posting bile. Bank login attempts from a local IP. Someone trying to change the pickup list at my son's school. Part of me wondered whether logging every incident made me safer or simply fed the fear. I kept logging anyway. Documentation isn't comfort, it's armor. People stepped in. Sarah showed up with takeout and a bottle of courage. Her boyfriend Alex wired my hallway with cameras and taught me where to put my hands if someone grabbed me. My manager Ben moved me off closing shifts and started recognizing their faces on site. Jaime's sister, paralegal, eyes like steel, offered pro bono help. Mrs. Gerard from 2B set casseroles on my doormat with notes that said, eat, please. My lawyer mapped each incident on a printout like a weather radar. This isn't random, she said. It's a pattern. We filed for protection. I didn't sleep the night before the hearing. In the courtroom, the parents sat with a high-priced attorney. He tried to paint me as unhinged, vindictive. The judge watched their midnight visits on my camera footage. She read the notes. She looked at the photo of my son and the envelope it came in. Enough, she said, and signed a restraining order with a 500-foot buffer around me. My home, my mom's place, my son's school, and my job. The defamation suit evaporated that afternoon. The next days weren't movie magic perfect. Someone sliced my tires again, face covered this time. The rental car tried to get canceled by my spouse, but the order changed the air. Police. Patrols increased. My building added better locks. My neighbors watched, and for the first time in weeks, the hallway cameras showed nothing but ordinary life. I took a real bath. I cooked actual food. I put my son's photo back where it belonged and straightened every drawing on the fridge like I was blessing the room. I saw my boy the next day. We went to the park. He flew on the swing like gravity was optional. We built a blanket fort in my mom's living room that could have survived a hurricane, then read books in our fabric cave until he fell asleep against my shoulder. My mother and I whispered logistics, summer programs, pickup times, lunches labeled with his name in block, letters, as if normal was a thing you could plan into being. Maybe it is. Work softened back into routine. I shelved novels, teased out recommendations, breathed in that coffee and paper smell that always makes me feel like a person again. Customers said I looked lighter. I felt it. I still write everything down. Calls, cars, mail, screenshots, saved twice, once to the cloud and once to a folder boringly labeled taxes. The legal system is slow, but patterns speak loud when you put them on paper. And when I can't sleep, I open the window and let the night in. Vanilla candle, fresh air, the kind of quiet you earn. I learned a lot, and not just about law. The $10 humiliation wasn't about money. It was about control. I refused to spend it, even as confetti. Where family can be a weapon, boundaries can be love in action when you're protecting a child. Paper shields, reports, orders, timestamps aren't romantic, but they hold. Communities form fast when someone says, that's not right. Let them help. The last time my phone buzzed with a number I didn't recognize, I let it go to voicemail. It was his mother, voice small, asking to explain. I blocked it. Accountability isn't a conversation you have in my doorway at midnight or in the comments of a fake profile. It's a court record and a quiet life rebuilt one ordinary day at a time. Tonight, my apartment feels like mine. Not a fortress, not a museum of damage, a home. My son's gap-toothed smile beams from the mantle. Tomorrow, we're making his favorite pasta and he's reading me a page from the book he's proudest of. Every third word improvised. I'll keep showing up for that. For him. For me. If you made it this far, thanks for listening. If stories about surviving and rebuilding matter to you, a quick like or share helps more than you think. I used to think I understood love, not the fluffy storybook kind, but the kind that's made of work, the kind that survives late-night arguments, job losses, and the ache of ordinary days. My mother always said, love isn't a feeling, it's a decision you make every day. I believed her. I carried that idea like a compass, letting it point me toward the man I thought would be my forever. His name was Tyrone. We met on a Tuesday night in October, in the fluorescent glare of a downtown laundromat. I was 23, lugging a basket of clothes that smelled faintly of bleach and cheap detergent, my hair in a messy knot, and my mind preoccupied with whether my paycheck would stretch until rent was due. He was leaning against one of those massive industrial dryers, all easy smile and warm eyes, like he had nowhere else in the world to be. We talked for 2 hours that night, folding clothes in awkward silence between bursts of conversation. He was funny without trying, the kind of man who noticed small things, the fray at the hem of my jeans, the fact that I always sorted my laundry by fabric type instead of color. He asked questions no one else bothered to ask, about my dreams, my favorite season, the place I wanted to visit if money wasn't an issue. By the time the dryers stopped spinning, I felt like I'd known him far longer than an evening. The early days were intoxicating. Tyrone had a way of making the ordinary feel special. Coffee runs turned into impromptu picnics. Late-night TV marathons became private little worlds. He'd bring me wildflowers from the empty lot near his apartment, scribble notes on sticky pads and hide them in my coat pocket. The first time he told me he loved me, it was raining, and we were sitting in his car, fog steaming up the windows. I believed him without hesitation. Looking back, the first red flag was almost invisible. We were at a small bar with some of my co-workers, and one of them, a guy named Vince, made a joke about my stubbornness. Tyrone's smile faltered just a second too long. Later that night, he asked me not to hang around Vince alone, just in case. He said it was because he cared. I thought it was sweet. Then came the small corrections. How I dressed when we went out, which friends were good influences and which weren't. At first, it felt like guidance, like he was helping me refine myself. But the rules kept growing. I couldn't wear short skirts without him there. I shouldn't work late without calling him first. He didn't like me going out with coworkers after shifts. The first time his temper scared me, we were arguing. About nothing. I think it was about whether to visit my mother for the weekend. His voice rose suddenly, sharp as broken glass, and he slammed his hand against the wall inches from my face. I froze. He apologized within minutes, pulling me into his arms, swearing he'd never lose control again. I told myself it was just stress. I learned to measure my words, to sense when the storm was building in him. Tyrone could switch from warm to cold in a heartbeat. Sometimes the cold lasted minutes, sometimes days. But every time he came back to me with gifts, apologies, and promises of change. The night it all shattered was in February, during one of the coldest winters in years. I had picked up an extra shift at work to help cover our bills. When I got home, the apartment was dark except for the flicker of the TV. Tyrone was on the couch, his jaw tight. He asked why I hadn't called. I explained, but it didn't matter. The argument spiraled so fast I barely understood how we got there. I remember the shove, sudden, hard, that sent me stumbling into the corner of the coffee table. The breath left my body in a ragged gasp. I remember his face afterward. Not regret, not fear, but something else. Something flat, almost bored. That was the moment I knew love wasn't a decision anymore. It was a trap. I left the next morning while he was still asleep. My hands shook as I packed a bag, my mind numb. I called my mother from a payphone 2 blocks away because I didn't trust my own cell phone not to betray my location. She picked me up without asking questions. The weeks after were a blur of legal paperwork, bruises fading into sickly yellow, and long, sleepless nights listening for footsteps outside my window. Tyrone didn't disappear quietly. He called, he sent messages, he showed up at my workplace. Each time I refused to see him, the messages grew darker, threats tangled with apologies until they were indistinguishable. The police got involved after he smashed my mother's car windshield in the middle of the night. It was enough to press charges. The trial was a grinding, humiliating process. Every detail of my life laid bare, every action twisted by his lawyer to make me look unstable. But the bruises, the photos, and the broken windshield told their own story. Tyrone was sentenced to prison. People think prison is an ending. It isn't. It's just a pause. I moved into a small 2-bedroom house on the edge of town with my son, who was only 3 at the time. It had peeling paint, a temperamental heater, and a yard just big enough for him to chase bubbles in. It was ours. It was safe, or at least safer. Life settled into a fragile rhythm. Mornings were filled with cereal and cartoons, afternoons with trips to the park, evenings with bedtime stories. days, but under it all, there was always that hum of anxiety, the constant awareness that Tyrone had family who hated me for destroying his life. His parents had visited me once after the trial, standing on my porch, their eyes sharp and cold. They didn't say much then, but I never forgot the way his mother's gaze lingered, like she was memorizing my face for later. That's the thing about fear. It doesn't need to be loud. It just needs to be patient, and patience was something they seemed to have in abundance. I told myself, over and over, that the worst was behind me, that Tyrone was locked away, that his parents wouldn't dare. But sometimes, when the wind rattled, the windows at night, or when a car slowed too long in front of the house, I'd feel it, the knowledge that someday someone might come knocking. It was the kind of morning that tricked you into thinking nothing bad could happen. The sunlight came through the thin curtains in fractured stripes, painting pale gold across the chipped kitchen table. My son sat in his chair, swinging his legs, while spooning cereal into his mouth, humming tunelessly between bites. The hum had no real melody, just a soft, absent sound that filled the kitchen like the smell of warm toast. I was halfway through my second cup of coffee when the knock came. It wasn't loud, it wasn't hurried, it was deliberate. 3 slow raps, each one perfectly spaced. I froze. I've always thought there's a difference between a knock from a neighbor asking for sugar and a knock from someone who's planned what they'll say the moment you open the door. This one carried that weight, the kind that makes your stomach contract before your mind catches up. For a moment, I didn't move. My son stopped humming and looked up at me, a dribble of milk tracing the corner of his mouth. "Mom?" he said, the words stretching out, a question and a warning at the same time. I forced my voice to sound casual. "It's fine, baby. Probably the mailman." But my eyes flicked automatically to the clock on the wall. 9:07 a.m. Too early for the mail. The knock came again. Same rhythm, same unshakable patience. I put my coffee down and walked toward the door, each step slower than the last. My fingers brushed the doorknob but didn't turn it. Instead, I pressed my eye to the peephole, and there they were, Elaine and Victor Harris, Tyrone's parents. Victor stood stiff, his spine perfectly straight, as if military discipline still ruled his bones. He wore a beige windbreaker zipped to his throat despite the summer warmth. Elaine was beside him, in a navy cardigan that matched the exact shade of her nail polish. Her lips were drawn into something that might have been a smile if it hadn't been for her eyes, cold, assessing, already stripping me bare. I hadn't seen them in over 3 years. My first thought wasn't, why are they here? It was, how did they find my address? My second thought was that I should not, under any circumstances, open this door. But something, pride, stubbornness, or the knowledge that hiding would only give them a story to tell, made me turn the eye knob. The air that came in when I opened the door was different, cooler, heavier, like it had carried them with it. "Elaine." "Victor," I said, my voice careful, neutral. Elaine's smile widened, showing teeth that never seemed to age. "Well, look at you," she said. "Still here, still getting by." The pause before getting by was a dagger wrapped in silk. Victor nodded once, curtly. His gaze slid past me into the house. We were in the neighborhood. I almost laughed. They lived 3 hours away. I didn't invite them in, but they stepped forward anyway. The morning after they came to my door, the first tire went. I didn't even notice until I tried backing out of the driveway to take my son to school. The steering wheel fought me, the car dragging awkwardly to the right. I climbed out, still, in my slippers, and saw the gash, a deep, clean slit, running along the sidewall of the front tire. It wasn't the jagged tear of hitting something. It was deliberate, surgical. I called the school, said my son was sick, then stood in the driveway with my phone in hand, staring at the tire. The street was quiet. A dog barked somewhere 2 blocks over. It could have been anyone. That's what I told myself, over and over. But when the second tire went, 3 days later, the lie started to taste bitter in my mouth. That time, it was after midnight. I had just turned off the TV when I heard the faint hiss from outside. At first, I thought it was the wind through the trees, but it was too steady, too close. By the time I got to the window, all I saw was the shadow of someone walking briskly away. I wanted to believe it was random bad luck. The problem is, when you've lived in Tyrone's orbit, coincidence starts to feel like a fairy tale. 2 weeks in, the eviction notice appeared. It was tucked neatly into my doorframe in a bright, orange envelope stamped with official-looking seals. For about 20 seconds, my heart stopped. It wasn't until I got inside, sat at the kitchen table, and read it line by line that I realized it was a fake. The dates didn't line up. The landlord's name was spelled wrong, but the formatting, the bold letters, the way it looked like the real thing, it was enough to make my palms sweat. That night, I lay in bed listening to the house creak. Every sound felt like someone moving through my walls. Then the calls started. The first time I picked up without thinking. Static, then breathing. "Hello?" My voice was too loud in the quiet kitchen. Nothing. Just that slow, deliberate breathing. Then the line clicked dead. It happened again the next night, and the night after that. Sometimes it was a hang-up. Sometimes it was a single word. Whore, liar, thief. Always in a low, almost conversational tone, like they were leaning in close to tell me a secret. I tried to keep my son shielded from it all. He was only 7. He didn't need to see the way my hands shook when I checked the mail, or hear the crack in my voice when I answered the phone. But kids notice more than you think. One evening, as I was taping a new lock on the gate, he came out onto the porch. "Is somebody trying to get in?" he asked. I swallowed hard. "No, baby. Just making sure everything's safe." His brow furrowed. Safe from who? That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about me anymore. The first person, I told everything anything to as Lena. She had been my neighbor for 5 years, a retired nurse with a soft laugh and a sharp memory. When I showed her the fake eviction notice, her mouth tightened. "This is intimidation," she said flatly. "Document everything. Pictures, times, dates. You think you won't forget, but you will, and you're gonna need it." Lena started, walking past my house twice a day, a quiet patrol in sneakers and a windbreaker. When I finally went to a lawyer, it wasn't because the harassment had peaked. It was because I knew it would. Her name was Rachel Ortiz, and she didn't waste time pretending she'd never heard of this kind of thing. She spread my photos and notes across her desk like she was laying out a battle plan. "They want you scared, reactive, exhausted," she said. "We're going to flip that. You stay calm, you keep every scrap of evidence, and we're going to make them explain themselves in court." It was the first time in weeks I'd felt my lungs fill all the way. The nights didn't get easier, the calls didn't stop, another tire went. But something inside me had shifted. I wasn't just waiting. For the next hit, I was preparing to hit back. The morning of the hearing broke gray and heavy, as though the sky itself was bracing for a fight. She arrived at the courthouse early, the rhythmic click of her shoes echoing against the polished floors. The air inside was cold, faintly smelling of disinfectant and paper. The benches along the hallway were half full, strangers waiting for their own slices of justice. But at the far end, like a thorn in her peripheral vision, sat Tyrone's parents. They didn't look at her, but she could feel the static of their presence. Every part of her wanted to turn around and leave, but she forced herself forward, her chin just high enough to hide the tremor in her stomach. Inside the courtroom, her lawyer's voice was steady and precise as he laid out the case. The late-night phone calls, the vandalism to her car, the threatening notes stuffed into her mailbox. He painted a picture of unrelenting intimidation, each incident documented and undeniable. Then it was her turn. She walked to the witness stand as if wading through water, every step deliberate. Her palms were slick, her heartbeat loud in her ears. But when she began to speak, the words came out calm. She told the story piece by piece, keeping her voice level, though the memories clawed at her chest. She gripped the wooden rail in front of her, grounding herself in its solidness. When the cross-examination began, the temperature in the room seemed to drop. Tyrone's parents' attorney had a smooth, almost friendly voice, but his questions were barbed. He leaned on insinuations that she had exaggerated, that she had fueled the tension herself. "Isn't it true you once allowed your son to spend the night at their home after Tyrone's arrest?" he asked, his eyebrow lifting as if he'd just exposed some hypocrisy. She answered evenly, explaining the circumstances, refusing to give him the satisfaction of seeing her rattle. Her lawyer objected when the questions veered into personal territory, but still, the undercurrent was there, the unspoken suggestion that she was the problem. Then came the parents' turn to speak. The mother's voice was sharp, brittle, laced with outrage. She accused her of tearing the family apart, of turning her son against his father's bloodline. The father muttered words like lies and poison into the air, not loud enough to be formally addressed, but loud enough for her to hear. And yet beneath the venom she saw it, a flicker of something not quite anger, not quite grief. It was desperation, raw and sour, the look of people who know the tide has turned against them. The judge's ruling, when it came, was almost anticlimactic. No gavel slam, no soaring speech, just a clear, firm statement that the restraining order would be granted for the maximum allowable duration. The words were quiet, but to her they rang like the first crack of lightning in a summer storm. Tyrone's parents stood, gathered their things, and left without looking at her, though she heard a hissed insult trail behind them like smoke. In the days that followed, the change was subtle at first. The phone no longer rang with blocked calls in the middle of the night. No more strange cars idled near her driveway. Her tires stayed intact, her mailbox empty of threats. She still double-checked the locks before bed, still found herself glancing into the shadows at dusk. But there was a new current beneath the caution: relief. Her son began sleeping through the night, his shoulders uncurled. His laughter came more easily. One warm evening, she sat on the porch with a cup of tea, watching her son chase fireflies in the yard. The air was thick with the scent of grass, the hum of crickets filling the space between moments. For the first time in years, the sound of footsteps on the sidewalk didn't make her heart jump. She leaned back in her chair, the wood creaking softly, and felt it. Not a rush, but a slow settling. The knowledge that she was safe, that she had stood her ground, weathered the storm, and emerged whole. And as her son's laughter floated toward her in the deepening twilight, she realized she had taken back more than just her life. She had taken back her peace.